The night was quiet, and the forest around the old human outpost was filled only with the soft sound of wind moving through broken trees. John, a traveler who had been wandering from one ruined place to another, carried his small lantern and walked carefully. He was used to silence, but tonight felt different, as if someone was watching him from the shadows. He stopped near the wreck of an old alien ship. Its metal sides burned and twisted, smoke long gone, but the scent still faint in the air. He had seen many crashed ships during his journeys, but this one looked strange, as if it had not just fallen, but had been abandoned on purpose. Something about the wreck pulled him closer, even though his heart warned him to turn back. Inside the broken shell of the ship, the lantern light caught movement. John froze, his hand gripping the metal pipe he carried for protection. The movement came again, small and quick, like the shuffle of feet too light to belong to a soldier. He stepped inside, his boots crunching over shattered glass and burned wires. And then he saw her, a small alien girl, thin and trembling, hiding behind a broken seat. Her skin shimmered faintly under the light, pale blue with faint silver patterns, and her large eyes reflected both fear and hope. She looked no older than 10, though John knew alien ages were not easy to guess. The girl raised her hands slightly, as if in surrender, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, please don't hurt me," she said, her words broken but clear enough for him to understand. John lowered the pipe slowly, realizing she was no threat. "I won't hurt you," he said, his voice calm though inside he felt uneasy. "What are you doing here alone?" The girl's lips trembled, and tears filled her eyes. "They left me," she whispered. "My people, they went away. They said I was useless. They said I was nothing." Her small body shook as if the memory still cut deep. John's chest tightened with an emotion he could not name. She stepped forward, her bare feet scraping against the cold floor. "Please," she said again, her voice cracking. "Please, human, pretend to be my daddy, just for one day." The words hung in the air like a knife, cutting through the silence of the wreck. John's heart skipped, confused and shaken. He had faced danger before, hunger, storms, and even strange creatures, but never had he faced a request so strange and so heavy. He looked at her closely, at her small hands clenched tight, at the way she tried to stand tall, but kept trembling. She did not want food. She did not want shelter. She only wanted something that could not be bought or stolen. She wanted a father, even if only for a single day. John turned away for a moment, trying to steady his thoughts. This was not his problem, he told himself. He had enough burdens of his own. Yet when he looked back, her wide eyes met his, and he saw in them not just fear, but a desperate loneliness. The kind of loneliness he himself had felt too many times during his wandering. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of broken wires swaying in the night air. Finally, John sighed, his shoulders heavy. "All right," he said softly, his voice almost lost in the darkness. "Just for one day." The alien girl gasped, her eyes lighting up as if a tiny sun had risen inside her. She rushed forward, but then stopped, unsure if she was allowed to touch him. John gave a small nod, and she gently held his rough hand with her smaller one. Her touch was warm, fragile, and filled with trust he did not feel he deserved. For the first time in years, John felt something stir inside his heart, something more than survival. He felt the weight of being needed, the weight of being called a father, even if it was only pretend. The night no longer felt empty, and the wreck no longer felt cold. He had come searching for supplies, but instead he had found a lost soul. Outside, the wind carried the sound of distant movement. Shadows shifted in the trees, unseen eyes watching. John did not notice, but danger was already on its way. The girl clung to his hand and whispered again, her voice trembling but full of hope. "Thank you, Daddy." John closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deep. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. But for tonight, for this fragile moment, he had chosen to stay. And the story of a lonely alien girl and a wandering human had only just begun. The morning sun rose slowly over the ruined forest, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. John and the alien girl sat near the wreck, the cold night finally giving way to warmth. She held his hand tightly, as if afraid he might disappear when daylight came. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but there was a fragile smile on her face. John broke a piece of dry bread he had saved and gave it to her. She accepted it with both hands, bowing her head slightly in respect. Every bite she took seemed like a gift, as if she had not eaten properly for many days. He watched her carefully, wondering how a child like her had survived this long. After finishing the bread, the girl wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. She looked up at him, her voice soft. "Do fathers tell stories?" John blinked, surprised by the question, then nodded slowly. "Sometimes," he said, "but I'm not very good at stories." "Please," she whispered, her eyes shining, "tell me about your world." John sighed, looking toward the rising sun. "My world is not much," he said, "but once it had fields of green, rivers that ran clear, skies filled with birds." The girl closed her eyes as if she could see the pictures in her mind. "Beautiful," she whispered, her voice trembling with awe. She leaned closer, her small fingers clutching his sleeve. "My people never spoke of Earth like that," she said. "They only spoke of humans as cruel, greedy, and dangerous." John raised his brow. "And yet you asked me to be your father." Her lips trembled, but she nodded because, "I believe not all humans are bad." Silence fell between them, heavy but not empty. John could hear her breathing, steady now, no longer filled with fear. The way she trusted him made him uneasy, yet also warmed something deep inside him. He wondered what she truly wanted and why she clung so hard to this idea of a father. Finally, she spoke again, her voice like a broken string. "When my people left me, they said I was weak, that I could not serve them, that I was useless." Her hands tightened into fists, her whole body trembling. "They walked away, and I begged them not to leave me, but they did not look back." John felt a storm rise inside him, anger at faceless strangers who would abandon child. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her trembling frame. "You are not useless," he said, his voice firm but kind. "If they could not see your worth, then they're the ones who are blind." The girl's tears spilled, but she smiled weakly at his words. "Daddy," she whispered again, and though John reminded himself it was only pretend, the word pierced his heart deeply. They walked together toward the edge of the forest. The girl moved carefully, her steps small and unsteady, but her spirit seemed lighter with every step. She asked questions like any child, curious about everything. "Do human children hold hands with their fathers?" "Yes," John answered, "they do." "Do fathers teach their children how to be strong?" "Yes," he said again, though the word carried a weight he had not expected. The more she asked, the more John felt like he was slipping into the role. He had promised one day, but already the bond felt heavier, stronger, impossible to break. Every time she smiled, he felt a fire in his chest that had long been cold. But he also felt a shadow, a warning in his heart. Something about her story did not feel complete. That evening, as the sun set, they found shelter in an old barn near the ruins of a human settlement. The walls were broken, but still enough to keep out the night wind. John lit a small fire, and they sat close, the girl watching the flames with wide eyes. "Do fathers protect their daughters at night?" she asked suddenly. John looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Yes," he said firmly, "they do." The girl relaxed, curling beside him as if she had always belonged there. Her breathing slowed, her head resting lightly against his arm. John stared at the fire, his mind heavy. He had told himself this was only for one day, but already he knew that when tomorrow came, letting her go would not be so easy. Outside, unseen in the shadows, figures moved quietly. Dark shapes with glowing eyes watched the barn from a distance. Their whispers carried on the wind. "She is still alive." Another voice replied, cold and sharp. "Then we must take her back." John, unaware of the danger, closed his eyes for a moment. The girl's soft voice echoed in his ears. "Thank you, Daddy." And though he told himself it was just pretend, deep down he already knew he would not let anyone take her away, not without a fight. The morning came softly, with the smell of wet earth drifting into the broken barn. John opened his eyes slowly, feeling the weight of the night still heavy on his shoulders. Beside him, the alien girl slept curled against his arm, her breaths slow and gentle. For a moment, John just watched her, wondering how something so fragile could survive in such a cruel world. When she finally stirred, her large eyes blinked open, and a small smile touched her lips. "Good morning, Daddy," she whispered, her voice soft as the morning breeze. John's chest tightened, the word echoing in his mind again. He had promised one day, and now that day had begun. They left the barn together, walking down a narrow path lined with broken fences and wild grass. The girl skipped a little, her bare feet brushing against the dirt. She pointed at small things that John no longer noticed. Birds perched on wires, flowers growing between cracks, a rusted sign half buried in the soil. Each time she pointed, her eyes shone with wonder, as if the ruined world still held magic for her. "Do fathers show their daughters the world?" she asked suddenly. John glanced at her, then gave a small nod. "They try," he answered, his voice low, "even if the world is broken." The girl giggled softly, holding his hand tighter. "To me, it is not broken," she said, "not when I am walking with you." Her words struck him harder than he expected. For years, John had walked alone, carrying nothing but silence. Now, with her hand in his, the silence felt different, less heavy, less sharp. He did not admit it aloud, but he felt alive in a way he had not felt for a long time. By midday, they found a small stream running clear among the rocks. The girl knelt down quickly, her reflection shining on the surface. "Is this safe to drink?" she asked, looking up at him with wide eyes. John tested the water carefully, then gave a small nod. She cupped her hands and drank, splashing some on her face, laughing softly. Her laughter echoed in the air, light and innocent, and John could not help but smile. For a while it felt almost peaceful, almost normal. They sat by the water, eating the last of John's bread. The girl asked endless questions, her curiosity endless. "Did you have a daughter?" she asked once, her tone careful. John froze, staring at the water, his reflection dark and tired. "No," he said finally, his voice rough, "but once I wanted to." The girl lowered her eyes, whispering, "Then maybe I can be that, even if only for one day." John felt his throat tighten, but he said nothing. Instead, he helped her braid the strands of silver hair that fell over her shoulders. Her soft laughter filled the air again, and for a moment, the world felt like it was healing. But peace never lasted, not in times like these. As the sun dipped lower, John noticed something strange. Tracks on the ground, fresh footprints, not theirs. His instinct sharpened, his body tense. Someone had been following them. He glanced at the girl, who was busy humming softly as she picked small flowers. She was too innocent to see the danger. John forced a smile, telling her they needed to keep moving. But inside, his mind raced. Whoever left those tracks was close, and they were not friendly. That night, they reached an abandoned farmhouse, its roof half collapsed. John set up a small fire inside, keeping it low so the smoke would not be seen. The girl sat near him, holding the flowers she had gathered, weaving them into a small crown. "Do fathers make things for their daughters?" she asked, her eyes bright. "Sometimes," John said, watching her. "Then today, I will make something for you," she replied, placing the flower crown gently on his head. For the first time in years, John laughed. A real laugh, quiet but full of life. The girl clapped her hands, smiling as if she had just built a new world with her own two hands. But outside the ruined farmhouse, unseen eyes watched from the shadows. Figures moved silently, their shapes blending with the darkness. They whispered to one another, their voices sharp. "She is alive," one said. The human protects her, another replied. Then we will take them both, came the cold answer. John felt a chill run through him, though he did not know why. He looked at the girl, who had fallen asleep against his side, her tiny crown slipping from her hair. For a moment, he brushed the flowers gently back into place. Sleep well, he whispered, his voice low. I'll keep watch. And though he had promised only one day, John already knew that promise was broken, because somewhere deep inside, he no longer saw her as just a stranger. She was becoming something more, something he never thought he would have again. A daughter, even if fate itself tried to tear her away. The air grew heavy as the fog curled around the broken road. John stood tall, the alien girl clinging to his side, her eyes wide and full of fear. The armored figures stepped closer, their leader's gaze sharp and cruel. You cannot protect her, human, the leader said, his voice echoing like iron. She is weak, she was cast out, she is nothing. The girl flinched at those words, tears filling her eyes. She buried her face against John's arm, whispering, Please, Daddy, don't let them take me. Her voice broke like glass, and John felt his chest tighten. He looked at the soldiers, then at the girl, and for the first time in years, his choice was clear. He stepped forward, his pipe raised, his voice low but steady. She asked me to be her father, he said, and no father gives away his child. The leader laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. You are only a man with a stick, he sneered, and we are many. John's grip tightened, fear rising in his veins, but something stronger burned beneath it. He had lived too long without purpose, too long in silence. Now, for the first time, someone needed him, not for food, not for shelter, but for love, and he would not fail her. The girl pulled on his coat, her voice trembling. You don't have to fight them. They will hurt you. John looked down at her, meeting her tear-filled eyes. Sometimes, he said softly, fathers fight anyway. Her lips quivered, and she nodded, holding his arm tighter. The soldiers spread out, surrounding them in a half circle. Their weapons glowed faintly, humming with alien power. John's heart pounded, his breath shallow, but he planted his feet firmly in the dirt. The leader raised his hand, giving a signal. One soldier stepped forward, his blade sharp and gleaming. John swung the pipe with all his strength. The clash rang out, metal against alien steel, sparks flying into the fog. The soldiers staggered back, surprised by the human's fury. John stood over him, chest heaving, eyes burning with determination. But more soldiers advanced, their steps slow and steady. John knew he could not win against them all, not with only his strength. Yet when he looked at the girl, her small hands shaking, her eyes filled with trust, he felt stronger than any army. If they want you, he whispered to her, they will have to take me first. The leader sneered, his voice cold. You cannot protect her forever. Human, she is a burden. She will drag you into the grave. John's jaw clenched, his voice rising with anger. She is not a burden, he shouted. She is my daughter. The words echoed through the fog, stronger than steel. The girl gasped softly, her tears spilling, but this time they were not only of fear. She pressed her face against him, whispering, Daddy, again and again, as if the word itself gave her strength. The soldiers hesitated, their leader glaring at John. Something about the human's stance, his voice, his defiance, it unsettled them. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the sound of the girl's trembling breaths. The leader's eyes narrowed, rage flashing within them. Very well, he hissed. If you want to die for her, then you shall. He raised his hand, and the soldiers closed in. John gripped his pipe tighter, ready to fight until his last breath. His body shook, but his spirit stood unbroken. This was no longer about survival. It was about love, about being the father she begged him to be. The girl suddenly stepped forward, her voice breaking. Stop! Her small frame shook, but her eyes glowed faintly, silver patterns shining brighter on her skin. You said I was nothing, she cried. But he says I am worth something, and I believe him." The soldiers paused, taken aback by her sudden defiance. John placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her, proud of her courage. The leader snarled, lifting his weapon. "Enough," he growled. "She comes with us." John stepped in front of her, his voice deep and unwavering. "No," he said, "not while I stand." The soldiers tensed, their weapons ready. The air grew thick with danger, every second stretching like eternity. John knew the fight would come, and it might be his last, but he also knew his choice was made. He was no longer just a wanderer, no longer a man without purpose. He was a father now, even if only for one day, and he would fight for her with every breath left in his body. The fog swirled as the soldiers stepped closer, their weapons glowing in the dim light. John stood firm, his pipe held like a sword, his eyes locked on the leader. The alien girl pressed close behind him, her small hands clutching his coat. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Daddy, don't leave me." John's breath was heavy, but his resolve was strong. He had lived many years without a reason, drifting from one ruin to another. But now, at last, he had something worth protecting. He tightened his grip and whispered back, "I won't." The first soldier lunged forward, his blade slashing through the fog. John swung his pipe with raw strength, striking the soldier's arm. The weapon clattered to the ground, and the soldier stumbled back in pain. The girl gasped, clutching her mouth, unable to believe the human could stand against them. But more soldiers advanced, surrounding him like wolves. John's chest burned with exhaustion, but his will burned brighter. He fought fiercely, each swing fueled not by skill, but by determination. Every strike was clumsy, but it was enough to hold them back. The leader watched with cold eyes, unimpressed. "You fight like an animal," he sneered, "but animals always fall." John spat to the ground, his voice sharp. "Maybe so," he said, "but even animals protect their young." The girl's eyes glowed faintly, her silver patterns shining brighter. She lifted her hands, though she did not know what she was doing. Energy flickered around her fingers, soft and trembling like sparks. John saw it, but said nothing, afraid to distract her. Two soldiers rushed at once, blades raised high. John swung his pipe, blocking one, but the second's blade slashed across his arm. Blood ran down his sleeve, hot and sharp, but he did not fall. The girl cried out, "Daddy," her voice breaking with fear. John gritted his teeth, his voice fierce. "I'm still here," he growled, shoving the soldier back. The pain made him stumble, but his spirit only grew stronger. He refused to fall, not while she still clung to him. The girl's hands shook, the sparks growing brighter. Her tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Please, don't hurt him." The energy burst suddenly, a wave of silver light pushing outward. The soldiers staggered, some thrown back into the fog. John turned, staring at her in shock. She trembled, her hands still glowing faintly. I don't know how," she whispered, terrified of her own power. John knelt quickly, gripping her shoulders, his voice steady. "It doesn't matter," he said. "You're not useless, you're strong." The leader snarled, his eyes burning with rage. "So this is why they cast you out," he hissed. "Power you cannot control, power wasted." The girl flinched, but John stood tall again, blood dripping from his arm. "No," he said firmly. "Her power isn't wasted. She just needed someone to believe in her." The leader raised his blade, stepping forward with fury. "I will end you both," he growled. John lifted his pipe once more, his body trembling but unbroken. He planted his feet, his voice loud. "If she calls me her father, then I will protect her as my daughter." The soldiers hesitated, unsettled by his defiance. The girl clung to him, whispering, "Daddy, please don't leave me." John's heart pounded, his blood hot, but he smiled weakly down at her. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered back. The leader lunged, his blade cutting through the fog. John raised his pipe, blocking the strike with all his strength. The clash rang like thunder, sparks flying into the mist. The girl screamed, her power bursting again, a bright wave exploding outward. The soldiers were thrown back, crashing into the dirt. Even the leader staggered, his blade knocked aside, his eyes blazing with fury. The girl fell to her knees, exhausted, her glow fading. John caught her, lifting her into his arms, his voice fierce. "You'll never take her." The leader steadied himself, glaring at them. "This is not the end," he hissed. "We will return, and when we do, you will both fall." He signaled to his soldiers, and one by one, they vanished back into the fog. Their shadows melted into silence, leaving only the echo of their threat. John stood in the empty road, his chest heaving, his arm bleeding. The girl pressed her face against his chest, whispering weakly, "I'm sorry." John shook his head, holding her close. "You have nothing to be sorry for," he said softly. "You are my daughter now, and nothing will change that." The night returned to silence, the fog drifting slowly away. John carried her toward the ruins of the farmhouse, every step heavy but steady. He had made his stand, and he had not fallen. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The threat had not ended, only retreated. And if they returned, he would be ready. The night around the farmhouse was quiet, too quiet. John sat near the dying fire, his eyes fixed on the shadows moving outside the broken walls. He had seen the tracks, he had felt the presence, and now his instincts screamed louder than ever. They were being watched. The alien girl slept peacefully against his arm, her small body wrapped in the old blanket he had carried for years. Her face was calm, as if the world outside did not exist. John envied that peace, but he knew it could not last. He rose slowly, laying her down gently on the straw floor. He picked up his metal pipe, the only weapon he had, and moved toward the door. Outside, the moonlight washed over the ruins, silver and cold. The wind carried whispers, too soft for her to hear, but sharp enough for him. He crouched low, scanning the tree line. Shadows shifted, but each time he blinked, they vanished. He was not a soldier, but he had survived long enough to know danger when it was near. Suddenly, a twig snapped. John swung around, pipe raised, his body ready. But nothing stood there, only the empty path and the sound of rustling leaves. Still, his heartbeat thundered in his chest. He returned inside, his jaw set tight. He sat close to the girl again, watching her as she stirred softly in her sleep. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe. But then her small hand reached out unconsciously, clutching his arm. "Daddy," she whispered in her dream, her voice trembling, "don't let them take me." John froze, his blood running cold. How could she know? How could she sense what he already feared? He brushed her hair back gently, whispering, "I won't let anyone take you." But deep down, he wondered if his words were strong enough against what was coming. Morning came, heavy with fog. They left the farmhouse, moving along a narrow road that led toward the hills. John kept scanning their surroundings, every sound sharp in his ears. The girl walked beside him, holding his hand, asking simple questions. But her voice carried a faint sadness, as if she too felt the weight of unseen eyes. At midday, they stopped under a broken arch of stone, once part of an old bridge. The girl sat down, hugging her knees, her silver patterns glowing faintly in the light. "Daddy," she said softly, "why do they hate me?" John looked at her, confused. "Who?" "My people," she whispered, "the ones who left me, the ones who said I was useless." Her eyes filled with tears, and she buried her face against her arms. "They said I could not fight, I could not obey, it was a mistake." Her voice broke with each word like shattered glass. John felt anger rise, hotter than any fire. He knelt beside her, lifting her chin gently. "You are not a mistake," he said firmly, his voice like iron. "You are a child, and no child deserves to be left behind." She sobbed, leaning into him, her small body shaking. John wrapped his arms around her, feeling the weight of her pain. And in that moment, he knew, whatever danger followed them, he could not give her up. Not to the cold, not to hunger, and not to those who wanted her gone. But even as he held her, a shadow moved above the ridge. Dark figures stood watching, their eyes glowing faintly, their weapons sharp. They spoke in low voices, their words carried by the wind. "She is with a human," one said. "He protects her," another replied. "Then he will die with her," the leader answered coldly. The girl suddenly lifted her head, her ears twitching. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They're here." John stiffened, his grip tightening on the pipe. He looked around, but the fog was thick, the world blurred. Every sound twisted into something larger, something threatening. He pulled her close, whispering, "Stay behind me." Her small fingers clung to his coat, her eyes wide with fear. Shapes emerged from the mist, tall and silent, their weapons gleaming like silver teeth. John's heart pounded, but his stance was firm. He might be only a man, tired and alone, but if they wanted her, they would have to go through him. The figures stopped a few steps away, their leader stepping forward. A tall alien with dark armor and cold eyes. His voice was sharp as broken stone. "Human, step aside. She belongs to us." John tightened his grip on the pipe, his voice steady though his hand shook. "She belongs to no one," he said. "Not anymore." The leader's eyes narrowed, a cruel smile forming. "Then you will die for her." The girl pressed her face against John's side, whispering, "Daddy, please." John's heart thundered, fear clawing at him. But as he looked at her, trembling yet trusting, something inside him hardened. He was done running, done surviving without purpose. If she called him father, then he would be one, even if it cost him his life. The morning sun broke through the fog, painting the ruins in soft light. John sat near the broken farmhouse wall, his wounded arm wrapped in torn cloth. Beside him, the alien girl slept, her head resting against his chest, her small body curled close. Her face was calm now, no longer twisted by fear, but softened by trust. John watched the sunrise, his breath slow and heavy. The battle had drained him, every muscle aching, yet his spirit burned stronger than ever. He thought about what the leader had said, about how they would return, about how they would hunt again, but when he looked down at her, holding on to him even in her dreams, he knew he could not let fear control him. The girl stirred, her silver eyes blinking open. When she saw him, a small smile spread across her face. "You're still here," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. John gave a tired smile, brushing her hair gently. "I told you," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She sat up slowly, her eyes shining with something new, not just hope, but belonging. "Daddy," she whispered again, the words soft but powerful. "You didn't leave me, even when they came." John's throat tightened, but he nodded. "I promise to be your father for one day," he said, "but one day is not enough." Her eyes widened, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Do you mean you'll stay?" she asked, her voice shaking. John reached out, wiping her tears gently, his voice steady. "Yes," he said, "from now on, you're not alone. You're my daughter, no matter what comes." She threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly, her small frame trembling. For the first time, her tears were not of fear, but of joy. John held her close, his heart heavy yet full. He had lost many things in his life, but now he had found something greater. The day passed quietly, the two of them walking together through the ruins. The girl laughed at small things, at birds flying, at flowers blooming between cracks, at the sound of the wind. John found himself smiling more than he had in years. Every step they took together felt like the start of something new. As evening came, they reached the top of a hill. From there, the land stretched wide, broken but beautiful under the golden light. The girl held his hand tightly, looking out at the horizon. "Where will we go now?" she asked softly. John looked ahead, his voice calm. "Wherever we want," he said, "as long as we go together." She leaned against him, her eyes glowing faintly in the sunset. "Then I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. John tightened his grip on her hand, his voice gentle. "You don't need to be afraid. Not while I'm here." For a long moment, they stood in silence. The world around them was broken, dangerous, and uncertain. But for the first time, John felt that it didn't matter, because now he had a purpose, a reason to keep moving, a reason to fight. The girl looked up at him, her smile small but strong. "I always wanted a father," she said, "and now I have one." John bent down, pressing his forehead against hers, his voice low. "And I always wanted a daughter," he whispered. "Now I have one too." Night fell, stars filling the dark sky. John built a small fire, the girl sitting close, humming softly. He listened to her voice, fragile yet filled with life. And he thought, maybe the world was not as empty as he once believed. The flames danced, the stars shone, and the wind carried the sound of her laughter. For the first time in many years, John felt at peace. Not because the danger was gone, not because the world had healed, but because he was no longer alone. He looked at her one last time before she drifted asleep, his voice soft, filled with promise. "Good night, my daughter," he whispered, and as the fire crackled and the stars watched from above, John knew this was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning of a new family,